Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Phillies Daily on the Fan Arts Podcast Network. I am your host, Chris Moore. Didn't mention it yesterday. You may notice in a hotel room today. I'll be back home in our normal setup tomorrow. But the Phillies cap off another series win. They've won 10 of their last 13 series. This time they upend the defending American League champion Toronto Blue Jays with a 7-4 win on Wednesday evening. A good start from Jesus Luzardo. Offense contributes exactly like we talked about on Tuesday. The offense able to get going. Kyle Schwarber homers, Bryce Harper, Alec Bohm. We'll get into all that, but the Phillies continue to roll and click off wins under Don Mattingly. 28-12 now they are since Don Mattingly took over, tied for the best start by a Phillies manager in Phillies history. So Don Mattingly continuing to push the right buttons, and this team continuing to find different ways to win, whether it's low-scoring affairs, the offense putting it together, and the bullpen stepping up when it needs to. And the Phillies get another win. They're now 8 games back of the Atlanta Braves, a little bit better than the 9.5 they were a couple of days ago. Atlanta struggled with the Chicago White Sox, and the Phillies still a game and a half to the good in the National League wild card, and they're a game and a half now behind the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals have won 6 in a row, so Cardinals also proving to be tough to catch, even a young team rebuilding. But still, over the course of the long haul, you expect the Phillies' talent to be good enough to run them down. But yeah, the Phillies continuing to click things off and beating again the defending American League champion Toronto Blue Jays. When we talked about this gettable month of June that the Phillies are in. Toronto was one of the teams I felt like they could play well against, but Toronto has picked it up here as of late. Before the Phillies went into Toronto, they've picked it up as of late, been starting to play a little bit better baseball. They're still very much in contention to make the playoffs, and they've had a lot of injuries in their starting rotation, and we saw 2 of those starters come back with Dylan Cease on Tuesday, and then Max Scherzer yesterday. And Scherzer, 41 years old, he's one of the all-time greats. If you watch the game, he became the 11th pitcher in Major League Baseball history to record 3,500 strikeouts. Max Scherzer's a great, but he's not what he used to be. And coming off an extended stay on the IL, I felt like this was a good opportunity for the Phillies offense to get themselves going, and they did just that. It was early and often against Max Scherzer, and then into the Blue Jays bullpen, and they built a comfortable lead that they were kind of able to coast to the finish with. Part of building that comfortable lead was Jesus Luzardo. Another really good start from Jesus Luzardo. He continues to throw the ball well on the road. Very, very interesting splits. Jesus Luzardo, 3-0 with a 1.54 ERA on the road. His ERA, though, at Citizens Bank Park is up above 7. I expect those numbers, as we go on through the season. He's probably not a 1.54 ERA guy like he's been on the road, but we also know he's not a guy with he's not an above 7 ERA guy either. He wouldn't be in the big leagues if he was that. So I expect both of those numbers to kind of regress to the mean, but having a guy who can go on the road and pitch like this is a big advantage because you're going to have to win road playoff games come October, assuming that, again, as we kind of feel right now, it looks like the Phillies are on track to be the number 1 wild card, which means you're going to play 3 games at home in the wild card series. But assuming the Phillies get out of that, they're going to have to win road playoff games, and having a guy like Jesus Luzardo, who apparently seems to be very comfortable pitching in other teams' ballparks, it's a great asset to have. And, he continues to just be very, very comfortable on the road. And he got asked about it and said it's just a coincidence. I keep the same routine, do the same things, in home starts and away starts. And so probably just a coincidence. And, listen, again, we're just over 2 months into a 6-month long regular season. So he's probably right. There's certainly elements to it, that are coincidental, but I do think there's an element of being comfortable, on the road and not being afraid to go into another team's ballpark and, and get after it and give your team an opportunity to win. And he's done that tenfold, with his road outings. And so, yeah, to be 3-0 with a 1.54 ERA, worked himself into trouble there in the 3rd, and then ultimately in the 6th inning when he got taken out with those, he threw back-to-back walks in the 3rd inning, was able to work his way out of it, and then had back-to-back walks in the 6th inning. And, again, worked into trouble, almost got out of it there in the 6th. Ultimately, they go to the bullpen, and able to work their way out of it, get a little bit of a help with the base running mistake, but also I guess you could look at it the other way, and the Blue Jays got help. Alec Boehm kind of lackadaisical on that ground ball to him, and that was a mistake, right? You have to know who's running. I mean, that's something that you get taught in the junior varsity high school baseball level. Know who's up to bat, know when you can take your time and when you can't. And Boehm just kind of took his time there in a spot that he shouldn't have and couldn't afford to. And if he doesn't make that mistake, maybe Luzardo does get through the sixth inning. So yeah, things kind of break even there, though. The Phillies able to get out of that sixth inning, and then the bullpen had its kind of rocky ups and downs. In a game that you're leading 7-1 at 1 point, 6-0, and 7-1. It's not a game that we wanted to see Keller, Alvarado, and Joanne Duran come in to close. You'd like to be able to give those guys the day, but fortunately, a day off today for the Phillies, so they'll still get their rest and be full speed ahead for this weekend series coming up against Milwaukee, which we'll get into tomorrow to set up that 3-game set against Milwaukee. That's going to be a fun one. Milwaukee's a team that we know you're probably going to have to deal with if you're going to play in October. So that's going to be a very interesting weekend series, especially with the way that these Phillies are rolling. So Jesus Luzardo continues to throw the ball well. And as we talked about, I was hoping that this offense would kind of get a lift against a Max Scherzer, again, a 41-year-old coming off the IL, and this offense answered right from the jump. Schwarber and Turner strike out, and then Bryce Harper hits the home run to left field the opposite way to put them up 1-0. Then Bomer's got a 3-run home run, and then after Scherzer comes out, the Blue Jays go to the lefty out of the bullpen, and Kyle Schwarber takes care of that, and all of a sudden it's 6-0, 4 innings into the game. But still great to see, especially Kyle Schwarber. I mentioned it; the numbers since he's moved to the leadoff spot have not been good. And so to go out and get a home run in this series finale, hopefully something that can kind of get him back to the trajectory that that we know he can be, and quite frankly, the Phillies need him to be. Bryce Harper had a really good day. Alec Boehm had a good day. Bryson Stott continuing to produce, had that RBI single to put him up 7-1. So the offense got rolling, kind of fizzled out there the last half of the game, but up 7-0 or 6-0 at that point. They kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit. But again, the Blue Jays, they're still plugging away at it. They've got a good offense, but still great to see Kyle Schwarber. Like I said, Schwarber was the big one to me, right? He's been struggling, and as it's felt like some of these guys on offense have started to pick it up a little bit. That's when Schwarber's kind of gone into his downturn here again since moving into the leadoff spot. And so, the Phillies need him going if they're going to truly contend and win the way that we hope that they can. And so Schwarber's got to be going right. But, you'll have these times throughout the course of the season. But would definitely like to see Schwarber, what kind of clip could this team win at with the way that everybody else is kind of going right now if Schwarber's back to where he was, before moving into the leadoff spot? If we could get those things combined and get everybody kind of clicking here at the same time, maybe they could make a run towards the Atlanta Braves and at least, have a shot at it come trade deadline time. That's really the next big milestone or next big step, that we have to get to during the baseball season. Obviously the All-Star game, but, as far as for the, nature of the team and what it's going to look like, how the trade deadline goes is going to be a very important factor. So, if we can get all the pieces kind of going in the same direction here soon, which it seems to be trending in that direction, I think the Phillies could make a run, and Atlanta's made it tough. But, like I said, the Phillies have cut it to 8 games, but that's just in time to head to a tough weekend series this weekend in Milwaukee. So if it all gets going in the right direction, there's still hope that they could at least make a run at Atlanta and try and get the Braves on their heels a little bit. The Braves have been full-on attack mode from the jump of the season. So, if you can make a run at them a little bit, maybe they start to kind of, regress a little bit. The one bad news that came from yesterday, Adolis Garcia, just as he seemed to be starting to get going on the offensive end, he leaves in the 7th inning with a shoulder injury, trying to throw out a runner at home plate. And I'll be honest, from my perspective, it didn't look great. And I don't know. It was good to see him kind of moving it around when the trainers came out and looked at him. But, to throw, and I mean, you could watch if you saw, as soon as he threw it, he knew that he hurt something. They're calling it a pulled muscle in the shoulder. Don Mattingly said they're going to do some imaging and some testing today. Adolis Garcia hasn't been great this season. He has been swinging the bat better the last week or so, but he's still a really, really good right fielder. He's also speed if he can get on the base paths, and he's also definitely the best option that they have on the roster right now, to man that right field spot. As the starting right fielder, he is far and away their best option. So, we will see what the results end up being, and whether he'll be able to avoid an IL stint. But just the way it looked, I can't imagine that's going to be the case. I think they're going to have to, whether it's recall Otto Kemp or go another route. Felix Reyes, maybe we'll see. But don't love any of those options really. It's something that they're going to have to look at. And again, Garcia, his production offensively has been minimal, but what he brings in right field is certainly going to be irreplaceable. And again, he was starting to swing the bat, a little bit better. And I think opposing pitchers know that the threat is still there, right? I mean, he if you miss with a pitch, Adolis Garcia will put it into the seats. And I don't know that threat, pitchers don't feel that threat, I think, with guys like Otto Kemp, who we're likely going to have to see replaced. But, with Justin Crawford and Brandon Marsh, maybe this gives, Crawford more of an opportunity to just go out and run and play every day. And you leave Edmundo Sosa in left field, see how they kind of coordinate that. Maybe Sosa moves to right and Crawford plays left, or they move Marsh over. Whatever the case may be, they do have some versatility there. But with Marsh and Crawford both being lefties, when you face left-handed pitching, that's not necessarily ideal. You'd rather have Adolis Garcia in that spot. But, hopefully it's a 10-day, it's a 10, 15-day thing, and, just a couple of weeks, and they'll have him back by the end of June. But, from what I saw, that's probably best case scenario. But we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, their plan is to get the imaging done today and learn a little bit more about it and figure out exactly what the best course of action is. But Phillies win 2 out of 3 against Toronto. But again, the one negative, Adolis Garcia coming up lame in that 7th inning with the throw. But the offense was good. Jesus Luzardo continues to roll, and now they head to Milwaukee. It's going to be a tough weekend series against the Brewers. We'll dive into all that in the next episode. But the Phillies continue to roll 10 of their last 13 series, 28-12 under Don Mattingly, and comfortably now in a playoff spot, another series win against the Toronto Blue Jays. This has been another edition of Phillies Daily on the Fan Arts Podcast Network. I'm your host, Chris Moore.